That's the thing.
I ever tell you about the time I downed an ounce of battery acid thinking it was paint thinner? Still might be dripping for all I know.
Hey, fellas! What's going on here?
Oh, impotent rage!
Thank God you're here.
We're being oppressed by an evil corporation.
Our bosses want us to actually work.
It won't guarantee us 200% raises.
Summer Fridays off and pensions for life after retiring at 37. Why? That's outrageous! But we're going out of business if we don't make some changes. They want free snacks, massages, and raises every year. And most of them go on disability with full pay anyway. You revolting chiselers, you!
We're trying to fire Nate for sleeping at my desk.
You were drunk! You would be too! He's just deadening the pain inside from being trapped as
We
a
had so many running gags, favorite chapters, motorcycle clubs around these parts I can't keep up. They all look the same to me.
Oh, I
So they blame Starbucks, global television, street verified to skip the commercial. Well, you can't say that for you.
I'm actually saddened,
lies? What's the point?
saddened by that,
Possible.
that our media
Understand?
look at simple data. I mean, and really that investigative end of investigation.
They want a six-pack of an eager
Free speech.
pickup truck and a depressing folk tune playing on the radio.
Martina did a joke.
This here's a free country, boy.
and have
But with thousands of
and have no investigative or few investigative journalists come out and say, wait a minute, that's not how we remember it.
Well, them journalists definitely not from NBC.
Well, I think
NBC, you are here to listen and not speak. I think we should go to the old-fashioned public health care.
A new disease. No one's immune. It's like the summer of the shark, except instead of a shark, it's an epidemic. And instead of summer, it's all the time.
Now, do you know how long ago that was? Do you know how long that was ago? Do you know how long that was ago that came out on fucking Simpsons?
Coronavirus will come back again in the fall, but then it will be a
tell
very
you.
different situation.
Yeah, because the presidential election is coming up, and we need to distract people attention away from that. So we've got our deadly disease. Now we just have to blame it on something that's in every household, something that people are a little bit afraid of already.
They, they got all your shit bought from China.
And why did you not have social distancing until March 16th?
And who in more people's house than Donald Trump? And who more people afraid of than Donald Trump?
Well, he's handled, it as the best he could, given the fact that he's surrounded by sharks,
And snakes.
and people are not really advising him well on the science side of it.
And we all know what he's talking about.
Yep.
What I'm talking about
Democrats
is,
and fucking Republicans. Both fucking parties been having a party on the motherfucking people for fucking decades.
Is of course controversial school just announced that they think it's 3.4%. You've been, I think, quoted in the New England Journal of Medicine a few days ago. Said, well, it's probably less than 1%. No, is that where do okay? So
Bullshit, bullshit, and more bullshit. That's why they took away my motherfucking Facebook live fucking channel. That's why they took away my motherfucking YouTube channel. Cause I'm talking about this bullshit. Cause I survived these legal motherfucking drug dealers. LLC, limited liability coverage, me doing nothing but motherfucking practice fucking physicians practicing on you and me with the medication they're getting from the pharmaceutical company then fucking big with.
let's hear Dr. Recessi's math equation on coronavirus.
If you look at the cases that have come to the attention of the medical authorities in China, and you just do the math is about 2%.
2%? That's not what I heard. You said it was gonna be an epidemic and a pandemic.
No.
Nigga, it was neither.
Neither, nigga. Lying motherfucker.
Tuesday morning now, and the outbreak of SARS in South
Look,
Park has reached
look,
epic
South Park even.
The entire town has been
TV
quarantined by
tell
the
lies to your vision,
nobody allowed in or
programs
out.
you to want to tell lies for a living, but give you a little fucking truth to navigate. To see
If you look at certain age groups, certain risk groups,
the ones that didn't got sick,
What about certain races?
the ones that didn't got sick.
You seem to have left that out.
as anybody, that the mortality for a seasonal flu is 0.1%. So even if it goes down to 1%, it's still 10 times more dangerous.
Wow.
Here's this town and this reporter.
Wow. Wow.
That must be Chris Como.
Wow.
Coming up next, choosing the right hair condition. What you don't know about hair care products could be costing you a bundle.
That is Chris Como. Next, let's hear more about Dr. Versace's credibility.
And unfortunately, this guy Fauci has been in this environment for nearly 4 decades across multiple presidents, and he's essentially embedded into the scientific establishment, which has created an unfortunate lie
What kind of lie?
about the immune system and an unfortunate lie about the solution.
For them to keep us inside is to keep you away from the fucking sun that keep you alive. You gotta be a fucking stupid fucking imbecile to trust these lying sons of bitches that we done caught and lied so fucking many times. It's fucking ridiculous.
So is it a virus or is it bacteria? Not if we got the right person in charge.
Nah.
Well, thanks, Fred, from city to city. We need to go somewhere that Fred won't take hold, like Iceland.
The plane won't make it to Iceland. You got a better idea, asshole?
Everyone quiet! Have to think. Just let him be. 10 weeks here. I need a magazine and a toilet.
And I need a blunt in Pornhub.
And unfortunately, Fauci is not talking about that because the truth of that leads to a solution which has nothing to do with mandating vaccines or shutting down the country.
Because of some shit another country sent us.
Please don't tell the supervisor I have the flu. I've been working with a shattered pelvis for 3 weeks.
And that's what's unfortunate.
Diseases from Wuhan killing Americans.
Many people are questioning both Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx when it comes to these models that continue to change and their motives, which you kind of touched on a little bit. What is your take on these doctors that are advising the president and why they're advising him the way that they are?
To scare the shit out of Americans.
We've had a pandemic preparedness plan that we put together years ago.
So you've been planning this lockdown with your little plan in place.
And what the CDC was talking about is taking the process from containment to mitigation. And mitigation means to be prepared to do things that would slow down the spread if we had an influx of infections, such as closing schools, social distancing, teleworking, and things like that.
So you've been planning this lockdown for years with your little plan in place. Before Donald Trump was in office, how in the hell would you gonna spread this shit?
House cat flu is coming, people. The Center for Disease Disinformation predicts with some degree of probability that the house cat flu might spread in the following hypothetical outbreak pattern. So petter beware, that warm body on your lap just might be ready to destroy your tender fiddles.
So y'all was gonna blame coronavirus on pussy. So what you was gonna tell people not to eat pussy? You've been wanting us on lockdown for years.
We need to start thinking about that now, even though it isn't absolutely necessary to implement it.
So why the fuck is you implementing it? Next!
Look, if you look, Christina, at the typical MD, many of them go into wanting to become a doctor out of some noble service. But fundamentally, the medical school education is really a big pharma medical education where the doctor is really trained, if this, then this. And the then is typically a pharmaceutical drug or some harsh medical intervention.
Versace and Birx got different motives.
Now, if you look at someone like a Fauci and Birx, they're sort of at the top of their quote-unquote game, which means they're highly embedded into the big pharma model of medical education and the big pharma model of what the solution is.
The more drugs they sell, the more money they make. Just like my grandmother. That's why they can't promote nothing Donald Trump promotes.
Nope.
Where he says, oh, it's anecdotal. Oh, hydroxychloroquine or Plaquenil's anecdotal evidence. anecdotal evidence means storytelling. It's not storytelling. The WHO calls Plaquenil and hydroxychloroquine a essential medicine for all health.
You never heard Dr. Versace say that. But you did hear Dr. Versace say this.
And that solution is typically a direct line from this disease, find typically a virus or a bug, and then recommend a vaccine or some harsh chemical solutions.
And we know what this is for.
And now the behavior is simply wanting your own bodily freedom and that of your children. So now if we don't wear a mask, which I will never wear, it will kill me. I have a congenital lung disease, which is why my voice sounds like this.
And my baby mama is a cross species. That's why her voice sounds like that. Breathing in CO2, that people can actually believe healthy people spread disease and push an agenda of injections that would clearly kill millions of people. They're going to try to make this vaccine mandatory. Jim Jones Juice Extreme.
And those are the very people they've injured over the last 40 years and already decimated whole population.
And trying to do it again.
Into the roof. We got one shot and one shot only, and that's to find a place where the contagion can't reach us.
Over my grandmother's house. That's where the hell I'm going to be. Over my grandmother's house.
It's very clear that the kinds of things that are being done now, that to promote conflicts of interest, patents and things that Tony Fauci and others hold, are driving these pandemics with the idea to all of our rights and all of our freedoms to strengthen our immune systems rather than be injected with environmental toxins which will destroy most of the victims. It's destroyed multiple generations.
And we can't let them destroy the next generation or kids' generation, especially when we know what they're doing and we know why they're doing it.
And most of that has to do with profiting the very, very big pharma companies.
For making money, not saving lives.
So this gentleman, and by the way, he prides himself on connections with Hollywood and Elton John and all this, and I think there's a group trying to make him the sexiest man alive on people.
And it's a group trying to make my baby mama the ugliest monkey in the zoo. I don't know if that's an accomplishment or not.
But you're talking about a guy who's embedded into the deep state.
He's the deep state voice on viruses.
And he's your typical example of the worst of the modern scientific establishment.
And so, in other words, he's a piece of shit.
Well, look, if you take a systems approach forces you to integrate multiple pieces. There's a political piece here, there's a health piece here, and there's the economic piece here.
And Dr. Versace is involved in all three, when a nigga should only be involved in one. Science.
In the case of Barack Obama, there wasn't a quote-unquote overreaction, right?
It was rarely even talked about.
We didn't shut down the country.
Nobody wore masks, toilet paper was cheap, and nobody said a damn thing about a damn test.
We had people, the media, essentially protect it.
And I had people who essentially donated money to me, like my boy Ernie. That was a very essential donation.
However, when you have the level of things that he had to go through, I think the deep state's really effect was to hit him with this coronavirus. And what's the end goal?
To have total control is the end game.
If we do not successfully do what I just said,
and we supposed to listen to him even before
I
we listen
don't
to the
trust
president.
that motherfucker.
If we listen to Dr. Versace, Mexico wouldn't be trying to get over here. Nigga, we'll be trying to get over there. If we listen to Dr. Versace, we better start packing our shit. Because according to Dr. Versace, we live in the most dangerous country in the world for diseases.
But I don't think we're going there if we do the kinds of things that we are publicly saying we need to do.
We? Who in the fuck is we? Last time I checked, you and Donald Trump is talking about two different things.
I got 5 on it. Legal aid before. The first law firm for the people, by the people, ran by paralegals. Paralegals who are smart enough to pass the bar to become a legal line lawyer. But we about to do something
We
totally
need to
different.
be very serious about it.
We about to
For
put
a
these
while,
sons of bitches in
the
jail.
life is not going to be the way it used to be in the United States. We have to just accept that.
We got to accept that. Ain't that a bitch? Well, I ain't accepted nothing but a donation from my MAGA, Christopher Cundiff. He's been a Cleveland Brown fan for over 50 years, so I feel sorry for him. He have to accept that. Yeah, the one he created.
It's very clear that this wasn't a natural evolution of a CV. Anytime you go by way of a laboratory, it's not natural evolution.
It's not?
And in fact, in those original studies that were published in 2015, Tony Fauci, the NIAID, Ian Lipkin through the new Centers for Discovery, and that's also NIAID money and diagnostics, actually funded the cell line strains that were used to grow the virus, and that cell line strain came directly from Fort Detrick in USAMRIID.
So you saying coronavirus was already here?
We do have something we've been holding on to, but it hasn't been tested. Get over here, NBC.
Well, we certainly believe in testing, but wow. Wow. Oh, yeah.
And that's exactly what Dr. Versace wants.
So an unintended release maybe, but USAMRIID was shut down in 2019 for safety concerns.
And probably around the same time the virus was released. Ain't that a bitch?
It says right in the paper where the cell line that was used to grow and propagate and spread these CVs around the world, because they shipped them to the laboratories.
They need
That's
to be
how
put in
research works.
jail.
And I gotta get donations from my boy Michael Fable, because that's how a hitman works.
So that it came from a laboratory is clear, and I think not only the Wuhan biosafety level 4, but the biosafety level 4 at Fort Detrick, USAMRIID, U.S. Army Research Institute of Infectious Disease, right there at Fort Detrick, where I worked for 22 years, and directly in that laboratory I did research on Ebola.
When we know that they lie, that's fucking
It's
stupid.
clear that these two labs
How
created
stupid
under
can
the
we
direction
be
of
as
Tony
the
Fauci when
fucking
it was in fact
sheeple
illegal
instead
in
of the
this country to
motherfucking
do those
people who
studies.
make
But
the
when you
world
work
go
for the
round?
deep state,
All
you can
that
do that
there
type of
is to
shit.
be is
So you're speaking of the
each and every one of
moratorium
us
that was
all at
placed
the
on
same time.
coronavirus research
We
that
all
was
the
then
greatest
transferred to the
creations
Wuhan
to
lab
be in.
at the tune
There's
of
no
$3.7 million.
fucking
Is that
God
what
in
you're
the
speaking
sky.
about?
So we paid for this virus?
Correct.
It's like
and
Santa
additional
Claus
funds
ride
that
on a
weren't
fucking
listed in
sleigh
that
with a bunch of
$3.7
fucking
million.
reindeer.
Probably from the billionaire
How the
club.
fuck you gonna
So
believe?
do you believe that
supposed
what
to know
Fauci
better.
did there
Shit.
was in fact a criminal act because he was trying to get around the moratorium of that research?
Hell yeah. I know I do.
Yes, I do. Just as he's done in this state by funding research in other parts of research, for instance, cannabis research. The U.S. government holds the patent, and yet it's illegal to do the work here, and he funds studies around the world to do that with taxpayers' money.
That's what these
Yeah,
rich
they can
bitches
take
do.
my money if they're gonna make weed cheaper and stronger, and they can make me a patient if they need any guinea pigs.
In my letter to
nigga,
the
that's why you
president,
believe
which I
in
sent on
God,
March
you
23rd,
stupid
I
fool,
said, look,
you.
we live in the
That's
era
why
of
your head
personalized
bald,
and
'cause your
precision
fucking head
medicine,
ain't
which
fell
is
off.
an expertise of mine which I get invited all over the world to talk about. What that means is one size does not fit all. You don't lock down everyone. That's what Fauci's model is. It's a medieval model of medicine.
Stanley, listen to me. I have SARS. There's only a 98% chance that I will live.
Well, I'm hoping there's a 98% chance my baby mama won't.
No, Dad, no!
Listen, Stan. SARS is destroying our people. The Native Americans put it in blankets they gave us. Soon there will be only 98% of us left.
Hopefully my baby mama is one of the 2% that's gone.
What can I do?
You must find a cure for SARS, son, and save our people.
Cure SARS? Oh, Jesus!
The spirit of middle-class white people is strong in you, Stan. Seek out the wise men in Bellow Creek. Now go, go!
If that was my son, I would have sent my son to the weed man. Son, seek out the weed man on the corner. Now hurry, nigga, go. And while you at it, get me some blunts.
Dad! Dad!
Stanley, did you have an inward journey with the old man?
And while you at it, get me some blunts.
Did you have a vision?
I don't know if I did or not. I saw something. Someone spoke to me and told me the middle-class white way to cure SARS.
Good. Now find a way to cure me of your mama.
Campbell's chicken noodle soup, Dayquil, and Sprite.
Yes. Yes, of course.
For black people, that would have been top ramen, Tylenol, and Great Punch.
Quickly, Stan, we must give it to everyone.
And for black people, that gathering would have been a barbecue.
And see, that what the Versace and Bill Gates bitch ass want to do. Want to be the savior of everybody. Fuck them two-line bitches.
Fine, they should be isolated, boosted up with immuno-supporting things like vitamin A, D, and C. Those of us who are well, we should be back to work. We should be running this economy. Okay, if you want to take something to support your immune system, do that.
Nigga, be our guest.
Springfielders are advised to stay tuned for more information if they experience any of the following symptoms: mild thirst, occasional hunger, tiredness at night.
Gotta get a juicer. Gotta drink juice, lose weight, won't get chest pain from answering the phone anymore.
Am I the only one got to distract themselves from the pain in their chest every time their chest gets to hurting? Is it just me? If I listen to some comedy, maybe that pain in my chest will go away.
And this is sort of the nonsensical science that Fauci is expounding, and it's what needs to be exposed, and really what we really need to talk about if we truly care about public health is building up people's immune system.
I heard that it used to fight off infections.
No. But that's not what Fauci and company are
I had the
concerned about.
infectious
Their
disease,
model
people
is
come
big
see
ag,
me.
which
Because of the
dirty air,
infection
dirty
that I
water, dirty
had,
food.
they want to know
want
how the
people
fuck
to
I got
consume
rid of it.
Not food that's
After they
healthy for
wanted
them.
the
And then
motherfucker
the
quarantine
solution
me
is vaccine
because
mandates.
they motherfucking
Think about what's
medication
gonna
had
happen
to
a
be
year
mixed
from
up
now.
and fuck
Hopefully
me
it
the
will be
fuck
the
up.
1 year anniversary of my baby
I can't get a
mama's
legal
passing.
When you
representation.
go to get your driver's license, Christina,
Because
where's
of
your
these lying crooks.
vaccine card? And Fauci's already talking about that.
That's why I'm
So
starting
now
my own
Dr.
legal law
Versace
firm.
is making laws.
I ain't gonna need the
Who
legal
voted this
landlord
nigga into
motherfucker.
office?
This is about developing
I'ma
a
put them
police
bitches in
state.
jail.
I hate to use these very
Some judges
harsh
too.
terms, but that is what we're talking about.
Because you need
Control of the
honorable
individual.
people working in the motherfucking system of justice.
It's
Not
a
these
very, very
crooked
dangerous
motherfuckers
time,
that's running
but
the
it's also
motherfucking
an
house.
opportunity for
Fuck
Americans to
that
go back to
shit.
our roots, which is freedom.
We about
Before
to
I have to
change
go
this
back
shit.
to my roots, Africa, they're going to send me back to where my ancestors came from. You know Joe Biden said they're going to have us all back in chains. Well, I wasn't in a chain, but they're going to put me in one. They already had me in cuffs.
Which is basically listening to truth and basically starting to, take back what is really ours, which is our truth, freedom, and health. And
Sovereignty,
Fauci's not
nigga.
about that. He serves the masters of Bill Gates.
When we get our
Sam
sovereignty
Zuckerberg,
back,
the
you
Clintons,
can get
the
some of the
CDC,
money that
the
they didn't have on
WHO,
the stock
and in fact,
market
the
on your
Chinese.
motherfucking ass
Everybody but
since you was
Americans,
born.
you lying son of a bitch, got everybody wearing masks.
It's the
Masks.
weakened immune system.
Simon says,
So all those
wear
masks and all
motherfucking
this
masks.
stuff, people didn't
Simon
wear this
says,
for humanity.
stay
The
your
big
motherfucking
issue is,
inside.
how do you
That's
keep
some
up the immune system?
bullshit. Them
Boosting up our immune
bullshitters.
system used to be important.
As I wrote to the president, vitamin D. Vitamin D is an antimicrobial. Why do you think in many of these hot countries we don't hear any about this? Vitamin A, which is all from the rich leafy green, dark green vegetables and fruits. That supports your body. Keratin, cytokeratins through vitamin A, which protects your cells.
So if they told the truth, it wouldn't be money in their pockets. And speaking of money in the pockets, I want to thank Susan Lawrence for putting money on my Cash App.
So these are the two foundation pillars, yet Fauci and Birx do not talk anything about that because a B in vitamin is an anathema for their vaccines. And same with the B in vitamin C is an anathema for their ventilators. You see? It's ventilators and vaccines. And this is big pharma. And these guys need to be fully exposed. And in my view, people like Fauci need to be indicted for a lot of serious scientific crimes.
You should?
Yep. And this has essentially been the modus operandi of people like Fauci for many, many years. But for him, this is a huge opportunity. And this ain't his first rodeo. This is his second rodeo. If you go back to looking at the HIV, AIDS, fake causality.
And these dirty
And what the
bitches
hell did he
took
do
me
with
off of
AIDS
Facebook
causality?
because they
Is
know
that
I'm
what
acting
AIDS
fucking
causality?
donkey.
I
I'm
don't
gonna
even
act
know that
a
one.
donkey about
And
this
so if you look
shit.
at someone like Fauci, he's a
As
guy
much
who architected
as I can
the big
explain
lie
to
that
what I done
HIV
survived
is responsible for AIDS.
to be
It's
able
a
to
much
explain
deeper
to you a
discussion.
lot of things
So
that I
that means
done
his
did
mouth got a
to
whole
be able
lot
to
of
know
bullshit coming out.
the
But
truth.
he built his entire career on
Being
that, not talking
in
about
you.
the fact it's the suppression of the immune
Knowing
system,
better
and people's immune system
is
gets
you
suppressed.
knowing you.
You can react to all
The
sorts of
100%
exogenous things
is
coming
the
in.
percentage being the truth,
I want to thank
being
my
the
boy Rob
creator
for the donation.
of you doing whatever you do. You supposed to fucking know what you do. Especially when you reach a certain fucking age. You become a responsible motherfucking adult, not a fucking slave to some make fucking believe. That's them making you into a liar as long as you are a believer. You have to realize for yourself to change what's in between the words believe.
I happen to be one now.
Lie.
People who was there.
They made you be the liar when they made you believe the lie. To continue the lie is you spreading the motherfucking lie because you are the liar now because you believed in the first place when the truth that matters is you ain't never supposed to believe a motherfucking thing. You live in a motherfucking world of need to motherfucking know, not no motherfucking make believe la la land bullshit.
Went straight to the National Cancer Institute in Frederick, Maryland to develop immune therapy. So it was the immune therapy known as interferon alpha, was actually a curative therapy for some leukemias. That I extended that work. I joined the Biological Response Modifiers program under the leadership of Dr. Frank Rossetti's lab. We confirmed the isolation of HIV from saliva and blood that Dr. Luc Montagnier, Nobel laureate Luc Montagnier, had done earlier that year.
And what happened?
Our paper was in press, at the time was confidential in press. Dr. Fauci called the laboratory. I'm a 25-year-old lab technician. He called the laboratory. I answered the phone, explained that Dr. Rossetti was out of town and would address his concerns when he got back.
And what Dr. Versace do?
Dr. Fauci demanded a copy of the paper, which was confidential. That's unethical. I refused to give it to him.
So basically, Dr. Versace was a scientist and the police, and probably the creator too.
Yep.
He threatened to fire me for insubordination. I didn't budge.
Dr. Versace, you little sneaky motherfucker, you.
That this was recognized.
That bitch ought to be in jail. That
And I
bitch ought to be
spent
in
the
jail.
first few years
That bitch ought to be in jail.
taking care of patients
That
with
bitch ought to
no
be in jail.
effective tools. It
That
was
bitch
like
ought to be in
putting
jail.
Band-Aids on
That bitch ought to be in
And
jail.
what was them patients?
That
Your
bitch ought to
test
be in
dummies?
jail.
Your experiments?
I
He
done
believed
been
Dr.
falsely
Rossetti when he came
accused,
back to
beat
town
the fuck up,
to give
thrown
him the
in
paper,
jail,
which
hold over
Ms.
my
Tony,
head,
Dr. Gallo
prison
then
time
copied,
for a year and a half because I wouldn't plead out to me filming a documentary on how racist Walmart is with the return policy and how they profile people that come in that bitch riding in
therapies that could have
wheelchairs.
been used right then to stop the spread of HIV/AIDS.
So Dr. Versace had control over all the AIDS information.
Yep.
Ain't that a bitch?
That continued, that resulted in millions of deaths.
So what you saying is we could have been killed AIDS, but Dr. Versace stopped it so he can give patients a vaccine so he can run tests on them.
Yep.
So he can come up with the cure?
Wow.
How many American lives did that cost?
None.
Oh my goodness. So Fauci, you believe, was directly responsible for the spread of AIDS around the world?
Absolutely.
Ain't that a bitch?
But we have the scientific tools right now that, if properly implemented, could actually stop the epidemic in its tracks.
That's why the person with the cure usually invented the virus.
No.
At least that's what happened on the movies. And ain't that what y'all base y'all scientists on?
No.
Movies?
Yeah, I watched Breakout. I watched Breakout.
Blankets. Blankets? Yes, we will present the blankets as a peace offering. But what the round eyes will not know is that the blankets are infected with SARS.
And in this case, it's coronavirus.
Oh, my juice loosener's never gonna come.
Hey, Dad, this came in the mail. Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
What's that? Next, Dr. Versace is into treatment, not cures.
Where throughout the 80s, he continued to direct therapies and the funding of therapies towards therapies for which he held patents and stood to gain clinically, when clearly all research showed that those weren't the appropriate therapies.
And would only help people, not cure people.
Our research, my PhD thesis, award-winning thesis, showed in fact another target would be the appropriate therapeutic target, and I was part of the team that developed peptide T, the FDA, Dr. Fauci, an immune therapy, a simple immune therapy, safe.
Wait a minute, so you helped invent some shit that would help with the treatment of AIDS? And what happened?
That therapy never made it to people.
Wow. You bullshitting.
So he prevented that from happening while he directed the therapy in a wrong way, leading to the deaths of millions. And I see the same scenario playing itself out now.
Well, at least he's trying, but people are woke.
70 years of data in its use. Same thing for interferon, type 1 interferon, very low dose, very effective at preventing the spread, even the jumping of viruses from species. And that therapy has been prevented from getting to the people. So now in 2020, we use pre-exposure prophylaxis around the world for HIV to prevent the spread of the disease in the high-risk population. And Tony Fauci is deliberately misrepresenting that and leading to the spread of this virus through the world.
Dr. Versace is responsible for AIDS and coronavirus?
Right.
How the hell did he get away with this?
So Dr. Fauci stopped our studies, forced the confiscation of my computers and my data from my office, and literally directed the removal of all my grants and all my careers.
What kind of medical scientist police powers did Dr. Versace got?
And
the same fucking power that the legal line lawyers that become fucking judges gave to these motherfuckers.
To
legal fucking drug dealers
XMRVs, that's the
and the
name
legal
of the
line
virus,
lawyers.
go away.
Dr. Versace is plugged in with
fuck
the
do we stand a motherfucking chance?
You ain't went away.
To
with all
say
the
they weren't a
criminals.
threat,
It's time to flip this fucking
when
system
in a multi-center
up the
study that was
upside
published in
down.
October of 2012,
Right side up,
Dr. Fauci,
if
for
you know what
that
the fuck
study,
you're doing.
literally
And the
put a
motherfucking
fugitive
time
from
is
justice
now.
at NIH.
So that's what my grandmother knew job at. When she told me she was working top secret, now I know what she was talking about.
And said I was not allowed to enter NIH or even fly over airspace when my name as a co-author was on the study, and it was said that we could not replicate our own data.
If my grandmother was security, take the loss on the data. Trust me, if you value your fucking life.
In that paper was fraud, where the last line of the abstract in the paper published in 2012 by Ian Lipkin said there was no evidence of the viral infection, when in fact our data showed clearly in table 3, 6% in patients in control.
So we've been lied to about AIDS.
When we would have found an association with chronic fatigue syndrome as the last cohort came into the study, Dr. Fauci stopped the study, insisted that money stop being wasted.
On AIDS research? And do what?
And use statistics to make the clear association of these mouse cancer-causing and neuroimmune disease-causing viruses go away.
How did that work?
He awarded Ian Lipkin a $34 million grant within months of the end of the study and the publication of the study, which was clear fraud by Dr. Fauci, Dr. Varmus, and Dr. Lipkin.
We'll lock all their asses up.
And they knowingly did this. and that grant was to open the Centers for Discovery and Diagnostics, and some of the money was used to fund the North Carolina lab under Dr. Barrett for the studies on how the epigenetics, literally our work in the retroviruses and HIVs, the epigenetics of the CVs and how their relationship to the disease.
And truth about the disease also.
The disease signature is clearly overlapping with what we found in the mouse viruses. And again, this I believe in the data support, significant data support, that this is a cover-up in the attempt to literally bury the evidence of the people who have been injured worldwide by Dr. Fauci's recklessness.
And still being injured. You lucky they just tried to silence your words and not your life.
I was arrested throughout. I was fired on September 29th when I gave a talk on September 22nd in Ottawa.
Who in the hell was you reciting at the speech? Too short?
It's so clear. There are years and years of where these decisions made by Tony Fauci, made by Robert Redfield and Deborah Birx, as we worked on programs, as they worked on programs in HIV.
Both were leading researchers combating AIDS. Today, they're guiding us through the coronavirus.
And supposedly the experts Donald Trump been talking about and supposed to know everything, but they've been wrong more than they've been right.
Come on now. Come on now, we ain't stupid.
Which literally at the time they should have been literally criminally charged for killing millions, and everyone knew it at that time, and it was covered up.
Dr. Versace and Birx, some cold motherfuckers.
Yeah, them bitches
Because
be in
of their
jail.
actions, HIV
We the
spread
people
through the
need to
military,
demand
through
these
the first responders.
We the
through
people need to
lab
demand these
workers
bitches be put in
and
jail.
doctors and nurses.
We gotta be fucking stupid.
And Donald Trump knows it. He also know they got the damn cure too.
In recent years, we have made remarkable progress in the fight against HIV and AIDS.
And now I got the cure, because now I know who's been spreading this shit.
All have their reasons for, publishing second this paper, for, taking the credit away from Luc Montagnier and the French and making this all of their own.
Not only is Dr. Versace a liar, he's also a damn thief.
And the headline, study finds pill greatly lowers risk of AIDS, drug already sold. How significant a finding, and what is the finding?
Well, Dr. Versace then had the cure to AIDS.
They held up, and they did that. They held up the paper so it wouldn't get published for months. They held up a diagnostic test. They wrote the patents to themselves for the discoveries.
Come on, people.
Which,
We need to put these bitches in jail with it. They need to be ripped of all their fucking money. All these corporations that they sitting on need to be stripped from these bitches. And these bitches, these billionaire bitches need to be put the fuck in jail.
Scientific breakthroughs have brought a once distant dream within reach.
And that's exactly what Donald Trump is talking about doing. As a matter of fact, the breakthrough is so in reach, I can grab the nigga.
His career spans 6 presidents and over 30 years of research. In the 1980s, his career heavily focused on the HIV/AIDS crisis. He cared for dying patients, met with patient advocates, and has helped shape initiatives in HIV in the United States.
This is it.
In 2003, it was the SARS outbreak, and in 2014, Ebola.
And now I know where to put the real money into the cure, not the treatment.
My budget will ask Democrats and Republicans to make the needed commitment to eliminate the HIV epidemic in the United States within 10 years.
We don't know what the fuck other countries gonna do. They won't have to worry about their damn selves. I'm just talking about America. And Dr. Versace better shut the fuck up before I tell the world his real plan. He was there from the start, so he knows everything.
All we know is healthy young men are getting all these strange diseases and dying. They're protected. They're thin. They look like cancer patients.
And what kind of men?
Yeah.
of 1981 was of 5 gay men from Los Angeles who presented with pneumocystis pneumonia. Now, I had been an infectious disease specialist for several years prior to that.
I bet you was.
Their immune systems are destroyed. And then you're going to try to isolate a virus. I'm literally handling them. And what did they do to them? Don't touch them. It was just like my grandfather. Don't tell him he has cancer because we don't know how it causes. Don't touch them. Don't hug them. Think about everything we're talking about today.
They even want us to stop shaking hands.
Stay 6 feet away. The psychological trauma to the patients. You know, don't hug them, don't touch them. At the time, I left the cancer. Well, it was that kind of thing.
Fuck the social distance. We on an emotional distance. We done emotionally distance ourselves. Like Dr. Versace is emotional behind gay men. As a matter of fact, he seemed a little angry about gay men.
And I was quite familiar with pneumocystis pneumonia. And it just struck me as an oddity that otherwise healthy men and another oddity, otherwise healthy gay men, got an infection that you virtually never see in someone with a normal immune system.
Dr. Versace, did you put a hit on gay men?
But it was only them. And they said it's only them. It's their bad behavior.
You fuck another man, you gonna die.
It's the gays, it's the IV drug users, it's prostitutes. That's God's retributive punishment for their
the government.
So
and God you trust. That's where they got that name from. You can't give the creator the name unless you're a fucking asshole.
Describing now 26 men, not only from Los Angeles, but from San Francisco and New York. Again, curiously, all gay men.
Dr. Versace was a gay man assassin.
Well, as I said and quoted in that article, it is a huge finding. It is really very significant. What the study showed is that in a study involving men who had sex with men, they divided it into 2 groups. One received what's called a placebo, and the other received a drug called Truvada.
So gay men were your test dummies.
Which is commonly and extensively used throughout the world to treat people who are already infected with HIV.
And you could have done some tests, isolate, and treatment shit then, and you could have ended the AIDS epidemic before it started. But instead of doing that, you've done nothing to stop the spread.
In this case, it was used to see if you took a pill every day and you're at a high risk of infection because of your practices, your sexual practices, even if you use condoms and try and reduce the number of partners, will taking the pill decrease your risk of getting infected?
Even though it was multiplied, you let the infected back into the community.
How culturally we spun something into their behavior. I was told prior to that time that I was to cover up that the blood supply of the United States was heavily contaminated, which I first reported March 29th of 2011.
Why in the hell you didn't do contact tracing then?
In which the studies across the summer with what was called the Blood Working Group with the National Institute of Heart, Lung, and Blood under the direction of Simone Glenn.
You're dropping names, so that means this story have credibility.
A paper was rushed to press called A Failure to Confirm, as if it was an association study, so that it would appear, in the journal Science, directly before the annual Chronic Fatigue Syndrome meeting, international meeting on September 22nd.
And she given events. That means this story have documentation.
That journal came out publishing false positive, that diagnostic tests were actually false positive and there was no virus. And those were the data I was told to present, that in fact there were no viruses, the blood supply was not contaminated. When I resisted and showed that clearly our data were right and true, and I was fired immediately.
Fired for the truth? That means this story has liability.
My lab shut down to all of my employees on September 29th, the day before the end of the fiscal year. Then for the next 6 weeks, I was followed and attempted to bully into reporting something else, and I did not.
Bully? That means this story have the Clintons.
This was on November 18th. My house was raided without a warrant. Officers said I was a fugitive from justice in the Ventura County Police, that I had committed a crime.
Fugitive from justice, that means this story have my grandmother.
And that they had no warrant, and the crime was supposedly that I removed my laboratory notebooks from the lab. My house was searched, my friend's house was searched. There were no notebooks. I was arrested that day without any charges. No charges were filed. I was held for 5 days without bail, with a bail hold, that all I had to do was sign the piece of paper, which was essentially a confession that said I was wrong and I would spend the rest of my life doing honest research.
Or either the research we tell you to do.
While I was held in jail, the journal Science, who we had convinced that our data were right and true except for the sequence of the virus, that it wasn't the synthetic virus clone, that it was natural variants of many strains. That was the only thing wrong. We proved the problems with the biological testing, and why we couldn't have a reproducible blood supply.
Don't say blood supply, because the only blood my grandmother supply is blood with bullets, and they come already hot, if you know what I mean. These the bullets you ain't gotta buy.
Because there were so many strains, and while I was held in jail, our papers were retracted, and these papers, this paper on the blood supply that was pure fraud, listed as failure to confirm, was published.
What was published?
I want to just, for our viewers' sake, the virus that you're speaking about is not CV. It's something else. Are we talking about HIV?
Correct. It is not. It's not HIV. It's a new family of HIV-like viruses.
HIV Part 2.
So of AIDS, developing the viruses, both AIDS and AIDS-associated cancer. So it's not HIV, but it definitely causes acquired immune deficiencies, including the development of cancers from opportunistic infections.
Not AIDS,
all
but
believers
AIDS
are gullible
as we have seen a lot
all
of it
believers are
in cancer patients who were getting chemotherapy and were getting their immune system suppressed, and we were called as infectious disease consults to see them. So I was familiar with the circumstances that you get from cystis pneumonia, and I just sort of scratched my head and said, boy, that's an oddity.
You are an oddity.
Not only with pneumocystis pneumonia, but with Kaposi sarcoma and other opportunistic infections. And at that point, it was like, oh my God, we're dealing with something new.
I'm rich, bitch. It worked.
My whole career and my life changed because I decided that this was important enough for me to change what I was doing and start pursuing this disease that didn't even have a name at the time.
But I'm pretty sure you had a hand in naming it among other viruses you done named, or maybe not named yet.
Tissue, it's called xenotransplantation. We directly injected it in the blood and created many viruses that come from animals that would otherwise not have been introduced into humans naturally.
So it's just not AIDS killing people, it's other diseases that got AIDS-like symptoms? Ain't that a bitch?
So the cover up of 100 million people with contagious cancer-causing virus. Contagious. Get that.
Hell no. I don't want that. That's some shit you can keep.
And look at our exploding cancer figures. Look at our exploding autism, chronic fatigue syndrome, AIDS-like diseases, autoimmune diseases. These are all from viruses that are acquired, not naturally, but through biological therapies.
Something Dr. Versace is an expert on.
And this has been perpetrated, by our government, knowingly by Tony Fauci, since that first explosion of HIV.
That you have been the report of since the first fucking day. And why in the hell was this whistleblower silenced?
And the lawyer was for wrongful termination and retaliation, and RICO, it's called PTAM, for me whistleblowing on the situation. So that case never made it to court. It was held under seal for 5 years.
Under who administration? Obama.
Nobody's saying the virus doesn't exist and wasn't isolated from the very sickest of people, but how did it get around the world?
They paid to get it all around the world, just like coronavirus.
That's why when we put out this petition, Fire Fauci, I think close to 50,000 people have signed it in 48 hours. And at least we have close to 1,000 medical doctors from all over the world.
Well, get his ass up out of here.
It's so clear there are years and years of where these decisions made by Tony Fauci, made by Robert Redfield and Deborah Birx, as we worked on programs, as they worked on programs in HIV, which literally at the time they should have been literally criminally charged for killing millions, and everyone knew it at that time, and it was covered up.
Well, if his ass don't come up with the cure soon, it won't be too late. And that's why they got to keep your ass quiet, because you know too much.
And you know when it was under seal means you can't even say you have a case. You can't get a lawyer because the government's considering going in on a whistleblowing case. And if the government comes in, then they take everything, and then they use the DOJ and they use everything.
Which they can't do now because Donald Trump in office.
And we've talked to the FBI literally since I got out of jail. And I hired a lawyer when I'm literally, just my career's over. I've hired a lawyer to defend me from the FBI.
Damn, it seems like everybody got to get lawyers to defend themselves against the FBI nowadays.
Because the FBI turns it around on you and says it's your fault you did that.
Well, let me end this video before they say it's my fault I exposed something. And if your name wasn't on this donation list, I'm making a fucking Joe Biden versus Brett Kavanaugh victim video coming up next. I already got edited, so